The dark days in South Africa there, finding out exactly how is it that we can finally go towards sustainable energy creation in this country. Various options being put on the table, but one wonders exactly the feasibility of it, the implementation of it. Obviously, that journey is still yet to be determined. Prof, your thoughts before I go and invite my first guest into this conversation. What do you make of what was said?
Interesting interventions, things that you could say should have been done long ago. For example, when we were told of a bid window 5, this was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And they called it, funnily, emergency power procurement. Right? If something is urgent and it's an emergency, do you take 3 years to sort it out? So I think they're coming back to say, no, let's shorten the process. But that should have been done even as they were calling it emergency. So I think it's a welcome development to say we're now not going to wait until 2025 for additional capacity to be put there. Secondly, looks like they've come to their senses around skills that are clear now. We're going to have to recruit back some of the people who have left. Those are my two highlights. I want to deal with the debt. I don't know what that means. Are they going to wipe out the debt? Is Treasury going to say we're now wiping out all the 400 billion debt? I'm not sure why that.
Well, he was not specific with that.
It doesn't look like they know what they're going to do yet, if they're going to wait until October. That's, again, it doesn't show that this is quite an urgent matter. But, we got, as they say, we've got to take small messes. I think that's the phrase. They say we can be grateful for small messes. But at least they have acknowledged that it's a crisis, and they're going to be roping in experts. I've always wondered, why is it that when you have load shedding, you get a range of experts coming out to say why it shouldn't be? And my question has always been, and I asked this to the CEO of ESCOM, but why don't you tap into these experts so that they don't talk and throw the stones into the tent, but they're inside the tent helping you? So I think they're beginning to say that through this crisis committee, they're saying they're going to engage private sector, they're going to engage experts to make sure that they can make sure that they can tap into what South Africa has to offer.
Well, speaking of which, let's invite also David Lipschitz, who's a renewable energy expert, into this conversation. And more than anything else, David, good evening to you. It's also around, how we need to have perhaps an energy mix, which is really coming to the fold once again. It's not necessarily a new conversation, but looks as though plans around gas, for example, solar energy, battery storage is also coming into the fold to increase generation capacity. Obviously, that is under bid window 6. What do you make of what the president has just articulated regarding how is it that we can even rope in renewable energy, which is, as I said, not a new conversation, but perhaps really fast track that mandate so that we can even reach a point of sustainable energy supply in the country?
Thank you and good evening. And I would like to first agree with what your guest has said, that we need a concerted effort to use all of the resources we have. There are obviously a lot of existing people that are advising government, and these are the same people that have been advising government for 20 years, and we're in this mess. I'm not sure that they're directly responsible because they're giving advice and maybe the advice is being taken or not taken. So there's all that background. I think that it's important to understand that renewable energy isn't the only way that we're going to solve our problem. I think we need to have a varied mix. I think the president said, there's going to be an expediting or expedition of getting the renewable energy onto the grid, of getting battery backup onto the grid, of getting embedded generation onto the grid. Sorry, I've been offering to supply electricity to the grid since 2008, and I believe that the private sector, at peak demand in the morning and evening, that whole amount of power can easily be removed from the grid, because we can take the whole private sector generation off the grid, because that's not base load. Base load is from smelters, shopping centers, big industry that cannot remove themselves from the grid in a quick way except to run their generators. And interestingly enough, last week I went to see a big manufacturing company in Paarl who've got a 2-megawatt generator, and I went to see them start the generator and watch how it took over from ESCOM 10 minutes before load shedding so that they could continue operations without being too severely affected. So I think there's a whole mix of things. I think the feed-in tariff is important, that people are paid appropriately. At the moment in the city of Cape Town, the price has gone up by 8% for buying, and the price has only gone up by 2% for selling, and the tariff ranges have changed so that people who were buying less than 600 kilowatt hours now have to pay more at a higher rate that everyone else pays. So although the City of Cape Town is saying we want energy, they've changed the tariffs in such a way to disincentivize people putting their own systems on the grid. So all of these things have to come together. The government needs to make announcements and then make sure that the tariffs and incentives, correspond and agree with those announcements.
Yeah. Is there anything that gives you hope that for the first time we're going to grapple with the solutions around this power crisis that's been going on for 15 years? Is there anything at all in the measures that are being announced, be it bringing of skills or reducing the ESCOM debt or fast-tracking, onboarding of power generation, and anything at all that will give us hope tonight from what the president has said?
I think the main thing is that the government has said a lot of things, and people say that the policy is bad. I've read the policy. And the 1998 white paper on energy, the 2003 white paper on renewable energy that said 30% of the grid should be in private ownership by 2010. 2010 was 12 years ago. 30% of the grid is not in private ownership. If it was, things may be different. ESCOM should, of course, be a strategic part of the grid, and each power station owner should be the general manager and owner of their own power station. I agree with the president that each power station owner should be responsible for his own parts procurement, obviously in line with, if you're going to buy a big generator or part, then make sure that you're buying it, if there are 10 parts needed, that you're not buying one at a time, that you are consolidating your parts orders just like you would do in any big organization. So I think that each production line needs to have its own general manager, but the procurement needs to be expedited. I worry a little bit that environmental concerns will be put on the back seat, and in an environment where we're trying to be more environmentally friendly, more sustainable, energy transition, and so on, we need to not be taking shortcuts whilst moving where we need to go. I think that a lot of private generation can come on board. We heard the other day that there could be as many as 27,000 private generators unregistered on the grid. If the government would do net metering and allow those private people to buy and sell electricity at the same price, or like in the stock market, if the electricity is 3 Rand, the person can buy at 3 Rand 50 and sell at 2 Rand 50. That's okay. At the moment, the person buys at 3 Rand 50 and sells at 50 cents. So there's actually no incentive for someone to cover the entire roof. I mean, for example, on my roof, I've got 6 kilowatts at the moment. I can put 12 or 15 kilowatts on my roof if I'm incentivized to sell to the grid. Now, that capital expenditure is my own expenditure. No one has to pay for that. There's no corruption possibility. There's a huge amount of willingness of people to really come to the party and really want to help. And I think that if the president just does what he said he's going to do tonight, I think everything's going to be great.
Well, we got to hope and see, and it's almost like a wait-and-see game to see exactly how that implementation strategy works. So you know that South Africa, I do say that kudos to South Africa, because we always come up with good plans, Prof. The only problem is that we must be able to see those plans actually come into fruition, right? We really need to start honing in terms of how the implementation actually works. We have to leave it there. Thank you very much, energy expert there, David Lipschitz, joining us this evening. So I take a break, a side step from now, from the top of the hour of 9 o'clock, because we've got indeed Power to Truth. I've had my co-anchor with me from 8 o'clock. And of course, today it's quite an exciting program as well, Prof. Never a dull moment on Power to Truth. Who do we have this evening?